you live under a rock or don't like sports-based comedies, then you may have missed the sensation that is Ted Lasso. The Cliff Notes version is that it's about an American coach with no football or soccer experience taking on the head coaching role at a Premier League club. The club in question is AFC Richmond, and for those of you that know football, you're thinking there is no AFC Richmond. You're right, AFC Richmond are an entirely fictional team, much like Harchester United from Dream Team. However, the footballing locations of the club are entirely real, so let's go in for a bit of a deep dive into AFC Richmond from Ted Lasso. Firstly, the club's Nelson Road Stadium is a real Premier League ground, although it's not based in Richmond, it's based in Croydon, and it's called Selhurst Park, and it's the home of Crystal Palace Football Club. AFC Richmond also has a similar colour kit to Crystal Palace, a mix of blue and red, which is probably more informed by the look of Selhurst Park than any choice from the show's creators. If you've watched the show, you'll have seen the club's training ground, which is a pitch with a singular modern stand which features club offices and hospitality. Why have hospitality for a training ground, I hear you ask? Well, that's because it's another football stadium. AFC Richmond train at the Sky X Community Stadium, which is the home of non-league Hayes and Yeading United, who currently ply their trade in the Southern League Premier Division South. If Richmond were a real team, who would their rivals be? Let's assume, and make an arse out of you and me, that they've been a stable Division 1, Division 2 club, so Premier League Championship club, for the majority of their history, much like Crystal Palace, for instance. In the show, West Ham are seen as the club's rivals, although I think that's more based on who West Ham is owned by in the show rather than any geographical rivalry. The nearest club to AFC Richmond would be Brentford, who they did play in the second season of the show, but without much fanfare. You could also make a case for Crystal Palace being a rival of the club, and to a lesser extent Brighton and Hove Albion, although that is purely based on the fact that Crystal Palace and Brighton have this strange, weird rivalry that I would be hijacking for the purposes of another AFC Richmond rivalry, and to a lesser extent they would have presumably a rivalry with AFC Wimbledon despite having never played at the same level. But they would have played the original Wimbledon FC, so maybe that rivalry would have carried over. So that's the footballing side of it done, but many of you may be wondering why Richmond? Well, Richmond doesn't actually have a football team or soccer team. It's a London borough that could support a professional club but doesn't have one. Richmond does have a Richmond Football Club, but they don't actually play football, soccer, or should I call it association football? No, Richmond Football Club, confusingly, play rugby union, which is very popular in Richmond because, one, it's an area that's very affluent, and two, it's based right next door to Twickenham, which is the home of English rugby, and so many rugby clubs are based in Richmond, not just Richmond Football Club, but also London Scottish, and they have Twickenham next door, which is the home of Harlequins, who play at a stadium called the Stoop, which is Twickenham Stoop, and you've got Twickenham Stadium, which is the home of the England national rugby team. But as far as football goes in Richmond, you'd have to travel to Hampton to watch National League South club Hampton and Richmond Borough, or just travel north to watch Brentford in the Premier League.